Now, after months of talks, Greece and its international creditors have agreed on the terms of another massive bailout. The deal gives Greece about $7.6 billion in emergency funds. In return, the country has promised to raise taxes and make more cuts to pensions and social spending. But Greece's troubles are far from over. This is the total of Greece's debt, and as you can see, it's constantly going up because of the interest that's due on it. That $375 billion that you saw there is nearly double the size of Greece's economy. Now, despite GDP showing signs of recovery, unemployment remains the highest in the Eurozone at nearly 25%. And Greece is likely to remain in debt until 2060. The IMF says the only sustainable solution is for Greece's European lenders to forgive large chunks of its debt. But that's something EU leaders, in particularly Germany, do not want. But European officials sounded optimistic that the deal would help Greece recover.
We have good news from Greece, where staff from all the institutions worked hard over the past days and until the early hours of today to reach a preliminary agreement with the Greek authorities on a policy package to support recovery in Greece. This agreement will now be complemented by further discussions in the coming weeks on a credible strategy for ensuring that Greece's debt is sustainable. It will also serve as the basis for concluding the second review of the programme.
TRT World's Jack Parrock is in Brussels. He says the prospects for a deal to write off some of Greece's debts appear to be looking up.
According to Greece's finance minister Euclides Tsakalotos, there's been a deal struck on debt relief for his country. He used the term white smoke in reference to the lengthy process it takes cardinals in the Vatican to choose a pope after 6 months of tough talks between Greece and Greece's creditors. Athens has been crying out for the measure, with interest on Greece's debt increasing by around $600 per second. The Greek government has been insisting the debt level is unsustainable since it signed a $94 billion bailout deal in August 2015. The International Monetary Fund has still not signed up to that bailout, saying it would be unable to until debt relief were considered. But the European Commission and Germany, big lenders for Greece, have taken a hard line on this issue. The European Stability Mechanism, which is the body that controls the bailout, says the new agreement does open the way for debt relief and that the Greek government has promised to implement in return a policy package of pension cuts and tax increases swiftly. It's hoped that there could be some money written off for Greece as early as 2018. Now, Germany has insisted consistently that Greece shouldn't be allowed to see debt relief, a measure that would be a hard sell to German voters, with Berlin remaining Greece's biggest lender. But for the people of Greece, this new agreement means further austerity, something that the left-wing Syriza government promised to put an end to when it came to power in January 2015.
Well, there might be optimism in Brussels, but there's very little of it on the streets of Athens.
I don't understand. What do the lenders want? They want the money we borrowed back. How are they going to get that money back if there's no growth in the economy so that people can work in Greece, so that money can circulate in the economy, when they keep squeezing the country into a corner? I honestly cannot understand what their goal is.
So taxes are rising, unemployment is rising. This should have ended a year and a half ago. I think they didn't do well, so.
Well, let's go to Paris now, where TRT World's editor-at-large, Craig Copetas, joins us. Craig, thanks so much for being with us again. This bailout money essentially means that Greece is going to be able to borrow money to repay some of its creditors. Does it really do anything for Greece's economy going forwards in the long term?
Well, look, when the first tranches of money went down there in 2010, that money was earmarked to cure a banking crisis, not a sovereign debt crisis. Then it turned into a sovereign debt crisis. Banks were bailed out. Now, what's happened now, 7 years later, is everyone's doing high fives over getting some 7 billion euros in relief. That's not relief. That's not even half of the yearly interest that Greece has to pay, which is in the 19 billion euro range. This is another example of them kicking the can down the road. This money will be used to repay the interest on the principal, and it's going to go on for decades.
So after aggressively cutting costs, as they've been told to by their lenders, the primary budget, that's before taking into account interest payments, is actually in surplus. It's about 4% of GDP. That's pretty strong. Can the government keep up this performance at such a huge cost to the rest of the economy?
No, not when your interest payments are some, 600 euros a second. This is about money. It's how long will the Germans keep saying, no, we're not going to cut you debt relief. They cut the banks debt relief, but they're not going to cut the Greek people debt relief. And of course, this injection will allow Greece to trigger certain things. But at the end of the day, the Greek debt crisis proves those who lack money when they come to borrow will also lack money when it comes time to pay. And that's what's going on in Greece, and the 10 million people who live there are suffering because of it.
Craig, a very quick final one. Should Greece simply have defaulted on its debt 7 years ago and dropped out of the euro?
No, the banks and the Troika and the IMF and everyone else should have cut them some slack back when back when the debt was not as high. What you have right here now is a Pyrrhic victory for the Greeks and a Pyrrhic victory for the banks. Jack was saying this is going to go on to 2060. I think he's being conservative. I think it's going to go on a lot longer unless they cut them some slack now.
Craig
Can't go on
Copetas,
forever.
Craig Copetas in Paris. Thank you ever so much.